Today at Deutsche Auto Parts, we're going to be going over the installation of a catch can system on a MK7 GTI. We can start by removing the engine cover, and all you have to do so is just pull up, and it just has grommets that hold the engine cover in place. Now the next thing we're going to do on this particular install is going to be remove this pipe. You're going to need either a flathead screwdriver and then a pair of, or you can use a 7mm socket, and you'll also need a pair of hose clamp pliers to remove this clamp right here. Now, just something to keep in mind, we're going to take this pipe out and then also the inlet to the turbo. This is not something that's required, but it does make your life a little bit easier when it comes to this install. So to remove the turbo inlet hose, we're going to start by removing this Torx. It is a T30, and we're going to use an extension and a T30 to loosen that up. Now this bolt is basically just a set screw to hold this thing in place. So you're going to loosen it up and take it out completely, and then you can rotate take that out, and then once you do so, you can rotate that clockwise, and then you can pull this hose out. Now as you see, this is our old PCV hose that we're going to be removing, and it is kind of tensioned on top of our current one. So just get down here and get past that point. There we go. Now the reason why we take this out is because to remove this PCV hose from this pipe, the easiest way to do so is just by turning and then pulling. So it's easier to do with this out, and it's not that difficult to remove. So all we're doing is turn, pull, and then our turbo inlet hose is out of the way. Now to remove this pipe, we can start by removing this T30 screw. This is the only thing that holds it in. The rest of it is a tension fit from the seals that hold it in place. So we're going to loosen that up to get that loosened, and then we are going to then remove some other items and get them out of the way so we can fish this hose out. And we'll throw that in our magnetic bolt tray so we don't lose it. And then if you take a look here, this will kind of pop up, off, and then it will go straight back. So we have kind of found that using a screwdriver might help some, and we can kind of pop that out right there. Now once we have that out of place, we're going to loosen up the rest of our stuff to get everything out. Here we have our bolt that we're going to remove, and again, this is just a mounting screw for this coolant line that's set in place here. It will, if you don't get this out of the way, you're going to have a hard time getting the PCV hose through underneath it. It won't clear. So we can remove that. Now we should be clear. So we have our coolant line loose here. As you can see, it gives us a little bit of play. We don't need too much to work with, but we also, here are our ignition coils. They're all plugged in, and if you don't get too much clearance here, you're not going to be able to clear that hose, this hose, to get it out of the way. So all we do is push and then pull up on each one of these connectors. And you'll get out of the way. Now we're going to pull this one off You don't need to necessarily pull the rest of them off, just this one. If you pull it off, it'll give you a little more clearance to get out. Now our pipe is not completely out of the way yet, so I'm gonna grab a screwdriver. Nope, we didn't need one. To pop that out of the way. And then the easiest way we've found is to pull this pipe out forward towards the front of the car. So you can kind of fish it through there. We found maybe you can disconnect the diverter valve and angle the hose over this side. Gives you a little more to work with just because of the bends of the hose. Maybe turn it like this, flip that up, and then this is kind of a wiggle it, check it, and then back and forth, because this is a little bit of a tight spot here. So be careful you don't break your hose, because keep in mind this is just plastic. So, and don't break any of these connectors or any other things on the back here, because there are some wires and some solenoids at the back of the head here. So now we have our hose out. So now that all of our PCV hoses are off, we're ready to install our catch can. So what we're going to start by doing is sliding our PCV hose in place. Now this is the one with the end that attaches to the PCV valve. So what we're going to do is route this through much like you would have had the other one. And we can pull it through. Now what we're going to do is route underneath this coolant hose right here. So just something to keep in mind. We're actually going to pull this back like this. And then route underneath here. And pull this around this way. Make sure we can clear this. All right. So now we feed this through. Keep in mind that heat shielding is obviously supposed to be going over the turbo so that it keeps the hose from getting melted. All right. And now we have that hose in place. Now, we don't need to mount it in there yet, but we just want to get it routed and out of the way. So before we route our second hose, we are going to install our turbo inlet pipe back on and get everything locked in place so that you can get it reinstalled. So here we go and put that. Again, this kind of pushes in. And then kind of feel it sit in place, and then turn it to lock. Now, as you can feel, we have it locked in place. Now we can just bolt it in. Now that screw does not need to be too tight, because again, all it does is basically a set screw. So once we've done that, we can now route our second hose, to which we are going to run behind this one. And then under, and kind of hook it in place, and you just push it down to lock it on. Now what we're going to want to do is route both these lines underneath here, but to do so we're going to need to remove this bracket, otherwise these two hoses will be stuck together. So we can just unhook it, and we actually can hook it onto the other lines if we have space there. So what we can do is route these lines underneath, and the other one's going to go over the top. So one of them is going to come underneath all the lines here, and then the other one's going to go just underneath this one and set in place. Now we're going to take this clamp off. To take these off, because this can't hook onto anything, and you're just gonna interrupt the flow of how these hoses route, you can just take it off. And really what you do is you just pop back, and then the clamp will just loosen out, and I'll show you how that works when we get it off. Take a look here, it just clamps on, so all you do is pull this tab up and then spread it open. Now we're going to install the bracket on the passenger side engine mount. There's a stud here on this bolt that holds in the engine mount, and then another threaded hole there. That's a perfect place. And we are going to use our bolt with a lock washer and thread that in place. And then we're going to put our nut with a lock washer down on the bottom. That is kind of tough to get to, so you might want to use a socket and an extension to just get it all set in place. Now what we're going to do is we're going to leave all this loose for the time being, because we want to have some play to work with when we're getting our catch can installed. So here we have our catch can, and then here we have our adapter fittings that will adapt from the can to the AN fittings, and we're going to install them. They are the same on both sides, so don't worry about which one you use. The kit's going to also include these seals. You want to make sure you use them. They mount between the can and the fitting side of the can. So we're going to thread them in place, and then we're using an adjustable wrench because we believe that's what most people will also be using. These are AN fittings, so this should be an AN10, and then the larger ones for the other fittings should be an AN12. So, and again, you don't want to go crazy, and tighten them in place. So now we're ready to install our can. Now on this particular setup, the top of this can actually is what holds the can to the bracket. So we can slot our bracket down in place to mount. And just keep in mind, this silver rod is a dipstick that's intended so you can check it, the catch can to the level of how full it is. This is really helpful because obviously many catch cans don't have this type of setup, and you don't know how full your catch can is ever going to be. So now we have our catch can, and as you see, we're loose still, but we're going to install our hoses. Now this hose is going to be we're going to mount to the front side. It doesn't really matter which side you mount them to, but because of the routing of our hoses, this is going to be the shortest one, so we want to mount it to the closest one. So we're going to, real easy, just get those in place, and you want to thread those on by hand. AN fittings are pretty great, but you are also going to want to make sure that you're straight on, otherwise you might have trouble threading it in. So because we're not going to be able to probably access that one once it's tight, we are going to use, again, a large adjustable wrench. The other one we had wasn't big enough to tighten this, so we had to use a larger one. And as you can see, we're pretty tight there, so we can move on to the other one. And this one we have to kind of angle a little bit down to get it in place. And then we're going to kind of let it sit naturally where it's going to sit. And then we can tighten that one in place. All right, now we're ready to reinstall this hose right here. And to do so, we're going to just pop it in place, and you hear it kind of audibly snaps in place, and then we can use our screw to hold it down. So as we're installing our screw, you're going to want to get this bracket at the right angle, get this threaded in place. Sometimes you might have to pull back a little bit like I am on this bracket just to get it to thread nicely. And then we can tighten this Torx up. All right, now we've gotten all of our hardware that we've taken off so far back on. Now we can just plug our coils all back in, and you are going to want to hear them all snap in place as you push back down. Everything we've removed is now back on, and now we can reinstall our hose. So real simple is set that in place, and then get that hose popped on. And we're going to tighten this clamp right here. Now we're ready to reinstall our engine cover. And we're all set. Now, here we have our catch can installed on the vehicle. We just want to make a few notes. This particular one has a dipstick intended to check the level. Now, this you can remove completely and check the overall level. You want to make sure that you don't allow this to overfill, otherwise you're going to end up with oil contaminants and other type of stuff all spilling all over your engine compartment, or potentially dumping back into your engine in large quantities. Thanks for watching. Be sure to subscribe and leave any questions, ideas, or feedback in the comments below.